Good evening, everyone. This is Jason Dean coming live at you. Again, I'm doing a special Film Fanatic show here. It's about 10:30 at night, and it's about it's a Sunday night. I don't do videos usually this time of night, and I haven't done a video at this time frame in a long time. I used to do videos quite a bit on when I was doing just Facebook Live videos. I used to do lots of movies like on Friday nights sometimes, or after when I used to work nights, and I remember I got in this habit of doing lots of videos when I got out of work, and I would usually do a video around 10 o'clock or so, and I'd like get home, take a shower, and then crack open a beer or something, and then do a video, and then I would eat dinner or something. And I would do that. I did that a bunch of times, and I haven't done that. I haven't done a video at this hour in so long. But actually, so the reason I wanted to do this video was I just came back from the movies. I just came back from the brand new movie, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. It came out this past Friday. It is a film adaptation taken from a short chapter in Bram Stoker's Dracula. And the basic scenario is it's about Dracula's travels on the Demeter, the ship, from Transylvania and Romania to London, England, to where he moves into Carfax Abbey, and basically that's basically where the mythology of Dracula evolves to, and it's about the beginning of his of kind of his reign. And so the story, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, is about the travel logs that are found after. In anyone familiar with the classic novel, and it's always been my favorite part of the book. I think that's a classic. It's a classic American, or not American, but classic horror literature. So one, if you're a fan of horror, it's an essential book to have. I think it's one of the, one of the sacred texts for horror. And I've always thought, that account where in the story the Demeter is shipwrecked, and they find this journal entry log by the captain, and it basically describes what happened during their journey, and how Dracula was on board traveling to London and basically kills everyone on board. And it's about that account. That's the premise, more or less, in a nutshell, what this movie is about. And I always thought, like, that would be, when I first heard about this movie, I was unaware that it was that. I thought it was just a monster movie. I saw the trailer. I can't remember where it was. I think I saw it. Yeah, no, I saw it. I think I just saw it randomly about 5 or 6 months ago, maybe a little bit less. I saw it on YouTube randomly, and it came up in my my feed or something, and I was watching some trailers or some crap that I usually watch on YouTube, and it came up as this new kind of monster movie or vampire movie, and I saw the trailer, and I was like, it didn't look very good. It looked really super cliche and just super predictable. And the trailer felt like it really gave away what the story was. But I had no idea when I saw the trailer. The interesting thing was, when I first saw it, I did not think it was a vampire movie. I didn't think it was a vampire movie. I thought it was basically this monster who is, it looked like it was a period piece, like set in, the 1600s or whatnot, and was on this big ship, and there was this monster on board, and he was basically killing everyone. And that was what I saw, in the trailer, and I had no idea that it had anything to do with vampires, even, and let alone that it was tied to Bram Stoker's Dracula. So, and then I kind of forgot about it. I just thought it looked a little bit. It just looked really super uber generic, like paint by numbers, relatively big budget or high or big budget Hollywood, vampire or monster movie, I should say. And it didn't look very good. And so, fast forward months and months later, I went to go see. It was like 3 weeks ago. I went to go see Oppenheimer, which is the new Christopher Nolan movie, and I saw that in the theater, which was very, very good. And one of the trailers was the last voyage of the Demeter, and suddenly I could tell what this movie was about. And then I read a little bit about it, and I was like, oh wow, that looks pretty fascinating and interesting. And the second trailer that I saw, I thought actually looked pretty interesting and pretty cool. And I've talked about it before that I feel like the state of where we are at right now, as far as movies that are in the theater, I feel like it's one of the worst times I've ever seen in theaters. Like, as far as choices, just movies in general that are new movies that are coming out, movies that look interesting. And movies where I'm feeling super motivated to go to see them. I haven't had that feeling in a really long time. And I've just been, I constantly, watch movies all the time, and I have a pretty big collection of movies, and I buy movies, and I love movies more now than ever. And I'm probably going to go up to my favorite place in the world tomorrow and buy some new shit. So it's, and I do this YouTube channel and everything. So I'm more into movies now than I've ever been in my life. And so it's just really odd. Like, and I love the movie going experience. It's pretty much my favorite thing to do, but I don't go anymore. I barely ever go. And so I was on the fence. I kind of wanted to see this movie. I kind of was, I was like, I wanted to see it. And, I was planning to try to go with a friend or a couple of friends, and it was only playing in Augusta at, or no, I should say Waterville. The closest place it was playing was in Waterville at Flagship. And I went to see Oppenheimer there, and I actually thought the theater was pretty awesome. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll make this work and do it. And so I did. But up until that point, I read a couple of reviews. I saw a couple of YouTube things around it, and generally it was really mixed. Most people said the movie was pretty good. Like, the acting was good, the direction was really good, but it also had some really big time. There were big examples of where the ball was dropped, and that the ending was not very good. There were a lot of things that could have been, but just weren't there. The dots weren't fully connected. But overall, I saw overall, most of the reviews I saw were pretty favorable and pretty good. And they said that this movie was actually pretty good. It wasn't terrible. It was actually above average, pretty good. There were a couple of people that said it was actually very good. Two comparisons that I had heard, people had said, one guy had kind of compared it to Ridley Scott's Alien, where it's basically truckers in space, and you're in this small space with these characters, and there's essentially a monster picking them off one by one. And that premise, that way of filmmaking, that movie, Alien from 1979, is one of my all-time favorite movies of all time. So that was interesting. And then another thing that had come up that I had heard was somebody was comparing it to the classic Hammer films. which starred Christopher Lee. You know, the classic Hammer Dracula films that came out in the 60s and 70s, and which, you know, are beloved movies for me. I was raised on those movies, and I continue to love those movies. I still watch them. So I was like, that's kind of interesting, but I was kind of on the fence. I'm like, it could be good. I really like the director a lot. He's made some really great films. So, you know, I don't know, but I wanted to see it. So we went, and I have to say, like, the first hour, 45 minutes of the film, the cast is really good. The writing is really, really good for the cast. The characterization's pretty good. I was interested. I felt invested into what I was seeing. I I love that it's a very detailed kind of period piece. You know, very much like the Bram Stoker's novel. The atmosphere is very good, and even with the character of Dracula, I thought when you were in the first hour, they did a really good job with, you know, not showing much, but you know he's there. You can feel his presence. And the first kill, well, I'm not giving anything away, but the first kill for the movie for the movie was pretty incredible. I was really into it, and I remember after that happened, I was sitting there watching it. You know, I was kind of enjoying it, kind of digging it, feeling like I'm getting more and more invested in the movie. And when they had the first kill, when that happened, I was suddenly like, I sat up and I was just like, oh shit, it feels like, okay, shit's getting real, you know. And I was into it, and I turned to my friend, and she had the same reaction. So so at that point, I was like feeling, okay, I'm digging this. This is cool. Like I can, you know, I'm in it to win it. And as the film progressed, it got pretty good. Like, and it kept with the momentum, and I felt pretty invested in it. And I'm, you know, again, I'm very familiar with the story. It's one of my uh, favorite novels of all time, Bram Stoker's Dracula. And there were some things around it of where I started to kind of drift off, particularly around Dracula's victims. And again, I think, you know, the translation from book to the big screen is tricky. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it won't work. And I know they need to be handled differently. There's examples of where the movie is superior than the book, I feel, and I like one example I feel that's 100% true is Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining. It's superior to the book. And I think what Denis Villeneuve did with Dune is incredible. As much as I love that book, and it's one of my favorite books, I think it's better than the book in some ways. It's just a little bit more cohesive, but classic. My favorite sci-fi book of all time. And so there's been examples of that, you know, where you have to do something different for the big screen. You can still have that story, you can have the essence, but in order to translate it when the film is on the big screen, you have to kind of there has to be a way of navigating it and making it a little bit differently. The Exorcist, you know, that's another example. Classic book, great, wonderful horror book. And William Friedkin did that with Peter Blatty's book. So there's been countless examples of that. But you know, you'll have other times where it's not so good. It's a little bit of a misstep. But there were certain things that happened particularly around Dracula's victims, of where they essentially turn into vampires, and then there's sequences of where they are uh, basically they are exposed to the sun and they burn alive. They turn to ash, and you know those things are not in the book at all. Like, and you can nitpick all day about certain things, but those things are not in the book. And that was a little bit, and again, the filmmakers can take artistic liberty with these things, but it was a little bit silly and a little bit much, I thought, my initial reaction. The other thing was the use of the crucifix. That's a very powerful symbol in Bram Stoker's novel. It does keep Dracula at bay, and apparently in this story there is no the crucifix has no effect at all on on Dracula. So that was a little bit kind of silly and ridiculous. They do go into a little bit of a backstory with Dracula, which I thought was very interesting, and actually kind of cool. And the other thing, and this was also the two criticisms that I heard about this movie that were really bad, was that the ending was not very good, and the CGI was terrible. And I know this movie used a lot of practical effects for Dracula. They built a real ship. I know they're like living in a real space. And I love what they do with his character in the beginning. He's very creepy. It's kind of similar to Nosferatu to a degree, which is kind of cool, but it's different, but it has that kind of vibe. So, the other thing, towards this third act, you actually get this big reveal where you actually see Dracula. And my first reaction was that it was kind of terrible. And it was clearly CGI, and it looked really, really bad, and it really took me out of the movie. It really took me out of the movie, and I was just like this. And again, that was a big criticism that I've heard of this film, and I have to say, all the criticisms that I heard of this movie, these folks were 100% true, because the minute I saw Dracula fully revealed on the screen of where he's there and he's in the same room and he's fully present, it just seems so artificial and just so out of place, and he just does not have that darkness or that presence anymore. Whereas in the beginning, you're only seeing little bits of him, and it's just enough that it's really good and it's really effective. So, and then the other criticism I heard was that the ending was really ham-handed and really kind of awful, and that it was a deliberate setup to bring you into this sequel that they are intending on making. And I have to say, the ending for this film was just awful. Awful. I felt like it completely was this completely, utterly generic, tacked on Hollywood way of doing films, where they have these paint-by-number setups, or setup in the film, and ham-handing you the idea of that, okay, folks, we're wrapping things up, stay tuned, we're going to give you another one right after this one. And I felt like suddenly they were treating the audience and like a bunch of idiots and morons that, and I got the sense that they could not really tie up this movie. They couldn't really tie up how to really conclude this movie. So instead of that, in the meantime, they're worrying about how to introduce a second film into this and turn this evidently into a new franchise. And I just thought that was just so awful and so by the numbers and just so utterly ridiculous. And it took me completely out of the movie. And it was so abrupt that it almost, like I said, the first 45 minutes of this movie, I was generally into it. I was digging it a lot. And it almost took me so far out of the movie that I almost completely forgot about my experience with the first part of the movie, to where I was just like, I felt so disappointed and taken out of it that I was like, I'm just going to dismiss this movie. I'm just going to, dismiss this entirely, which is crazy. Crazy, I think. But I kind of feel like that's the case, And I don't feel, I'm not sure what happened. I kind of got a feeling that the ending and certain creative liberties and choices for this film were not of the directors, and they were probably from the studio executives. And there were, I got this feeling like when you got to the climax in the third chapter, like I got this feeling like instead of there just being one cook in the kitchen, meaning that the director, suddenly there were a bunch of cooks in the kitchen, and that there was intense pressure from the studio on how we can milk this baby dry and set people up, in this paint by numbers way of explaining things to tell the public that, or your audience that, okay, there's going to be a couple other movies coming down the pike based off of this one. And it was really disappointing. It was so like ham-handed and just so generic and just so Hollywood. And then the other thing too, like I said, when you're first shown Dracula, it's a disappointment. You really, you're really, I was really taken out of the movie. But the last act, he is in it a lot. And again, it just continues with this really, the CGI is terrible. It's really bad. And it doesn't look anything like, there's no organic vibe from any of the effects. It feels completely artificial. And I knew going into this movie that there was a risk because like again, it's this story is based on a small little passage basically in the book of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but I've always felt it's like the most it's one of the coolest sections in the book, if not the coolest part of the book. And I always thought, well, okay, that's a danger. Yeah, that's like the best part of the book, but how can they make this into a 2-hour movie, And there's like a danger in that. How are they going to stretch that? How are they going to is it going to overstay its welcome? Like that kind of thing. But it immediately made me think of Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, starring Gary Oldman, which I think overall, pound for pound, is the greatest film adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel. And also another one that I really, really love is Frank Langella's Dracula, which came out in '79. Really, really awesome Dracula movie. And of course the Hammer films. Those have nothing to do with Bram Stoker's work, but those Coppola's and Frank Langella's adaptations are very true to the book. Very, very true to the book. They basically are the books in a lot of ways. Or the book. So, but in those movies, in the book, they do go into that whole section of what happens to the crew and what happens on the Demeter. They do show that. And in the book, Dracula, of course, is, evil incarnate, but he has the power to shapeshift, and he can change into many different forms. He can turn into this, bat-like creature. He can turn into this werewolf. He can turn into a bat. He can shapeshift. He can turn into fog and mist. He has the power over the elements to control like nature. So he's a shapeshifter, and in the book, I believe, it's been a little while since I've read the book, but in the book, while he's on the Demeter, he turns into this like werewolf creature, and he just basically slaughters everybody on the boat, and it's done, And in Coppola's version and also Frank Langella's version, the way they showed that whole sequence was amazing, especially Coppola's version, because Dracula takes on the form of this beast, this werewolf, and he just like kills everybody. And there's a scene of where he just like slices all these people open and cuts all their throats, and you just see this like spray of blood all across the boat, and it's like it's so amazing. And but the thing that's so great about those sequences and those movies in general is that essentially it's a guy in a fucking suit, and the effects are just so amazing. There's no, not even one fucking trace of CGI, and it's so goddamn effective. It's like, you know, think when I was talking about Alien, it's like imagine seeing Alien now, like, you know, and essentially that same thing. It's a guy in a suit, and when it's revealed, you see a guy in a suit, and it's all practical effects. It's all handmade, and it's organic, and it's, you know, it feels real, tangible, something you can kind of touch. And like I was thinking, like imagine seeing Alien, where, like, say it came out now, and everything is so strong, but then all of a sudden they do show the alien, and it's completely computer generated. 100% of the people seeing that would take them out of the movie, completely. It would erode the tension that has been building up until that point, and or it would undo the tension. And I just don't understand why they decided to do that. I mean, there's so many great movies to reference and to go back to see how they did it right. And I'm like, why did they do it this way? And yeah. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I would say don't go to don't go see this in the theater, and, you know, see it, see it in your own time, but I wouldn't go see this in the theater. It's not really worth it. I still say that there was some of the actors are really great, some of the writing is really great, some of the atmosphere is really, really great. But when it comes to the big, grandiose sections of where, you have what does Dracula really bring to the big screen, and then the ending, and those two things are, I think, complete and utter misfires, that it's almost so bad that you almost have to just, unfortunately, dismiss the entire movie. So that's Jason. This is Jason Dean, and this is my review. I just came out of the theater for The Voyage of the Last Demeter. So thanks again, and we will see you again sometime soon. Peace.